This is my true story. I worked my whole life so my daughter could live in comfort. I gave her food, clothes, education, even money to buy her home. I thought one day she would honor me. But one evening, with her friends around, she looked at me and smirked. She mocked, "You're worth less than my dog." They laughed while I sat silent. My heart cracked, but I did not fight back. I just smiled. Hours later, I erased everything she relied on. Before I continue, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is. And please subscribe so more people can hear me struggle. I was not born into wealth. My hands learned work before they learned rest. I spent my youth lifting, carrying, bending, breaking my back to earn a living. Every dollar I made was not for me, but for my family. When my daughter was born, I swore she would never know hunger, never know cold, never know the pain I carried through my early life. From that day on, my life stopped being about me. It became about her. When she was small, I worked long shifts, sometimes 2 jobs, sometimes 3. I walked home in the dark, shoes worn, body aching, but my pockets full enough to bring food and clothes for her. She never saw the hunger I hid because I made sure her plate was full before mine. Many nights I went to bed empty so she could sleep with a full stomach. I did not complain. I told myself this was what a father was meant to do. As she grew, the bills grew too. School fees, books, uniforms. I paid them all. I worked late nights under harsh lights, my body breaking slowly so she could sit in bright classrooms and learn. When she needed a computer, I bought one. When she wanted new clothes, I found the money. When she cried about not having what other children had, I sold what I could and made sure she did not feel left behind. Every sacrifice I made was hidden behind a smile. She thought life was easy. She thought comfort was normal. She never saw the price. When she became a teenager, her demands changed. It was no longer just food or clothes. It was status. She wanted a car. I did not have the money, but I found a way. I worked overtime. I sold land. I cut into my savings. I bought her that car because I believed it would keep her safe, make her happy, and give her the life I never had. Then came college. Tuition drained me, but I paid it. Rent, books, expenses. All of it fell on my shoulders. She studied in comfort because I worked in pain. Every check I signed was another piece of my life given away. I told myself it was worth it because she was my blood, my future, my daughter. When she graduated, she wanted a house. I gave her the down payment. When she needed money for furniture, I handed it over. When her debts piled up from careless spending, I cleared them. Every time she stumbled, I was there to lift her. I thought that was what fathers did. Give without end, love without conditions. I also saved for her future. Decades of work went into those savings. I built accounts, I bought bonds, I kept money aside, not for myself, but for her. I wanted her to have security long after I was gone. I thought one day she would look at me with respect, maybe even gratitude. I thought one day she would understand what I had done. I never lived rich. My clothes stayed simple, my shoes stayed old, my house stayed plain. But she lived rich because of me. She had everything she asked for because I worked myself to the bone to provide it. I told myself again and again, one day she will see. One day she will know. One day she will honor me. That belief carried me through the years of pain and sacrifice. That belief was the reason I kept giving, but I was wrong. I learned too late that some children do not see sacrifice as love. They see it as weakness. They do not honor the hands that fed them. They mock them. And one night, my daughter showed me the truth with her laughter. Cruelty does not always come with shouting. Sometimes it comes in small ways, like drops of water that slowly break stone. With my daughter, it began quietly. At first, she grew impatient when I asked her questions. If I asked her to repeat something, she rolled her eyes. If I spoke too long, she sighed loud enough for me to hear. Those small things cut deeper than knives because they were not mistakes. They were signs. She began to treat me as if I was in the way. When I walked too slowly, she mocked my steps. When I coughed, she groaned like it bothered her. When I forgot something, she laughed and called me old. To her friends, it was a joke. To me, it was humiliation. The bond I thought was unbreakable started to weaken. I remembered when she was a child, running to me after school, hugging me tight, calling me her hero. Now, she barely looked at me when I entered the room. Her phone was more important. Her friends were more important. My presence was a shadow she did not want near her light. When relatives visited, she treated me like furniture. I spoke, and she cut me off. I tried to share stories from the past, about her childhood, about sacrifices I made, and she rolled her eyes, embarrassed, as if my words carried no value. Once, I mentioned how hard I had worked to buy her first bicycle, thinking it would make her smile. Instead, she snapped, "Why do you always remind me?" It's annoying. Her words silenced me. I sat there pretending it didn't matter, but inside, something cracked. The cruel signs grew sharper with time. She began to compare me to others. "Look at their fathers," she said once, pointing at a friend's dad who wore expensive clothes and drove a new car. "Why don't you ever have style like that?" I stayed quiet. She did not know that the money I could have used for myself was spent on her comfort. Every shirt I didn't buy, every coat I didn't wear, became her tuition, her rent, her meals. She saw none of it. She only saw what I lacked. She also started making jokes. At first small, then sharper. If my hands trembled holding a glass, she laughed and said, "Careful, Grandpa." If I sat in her living room too long, she said, "Don't you have somewhere else to be?" She masked them as jokes, but I knew the truth. Behind the laughter was disrespect. Behind the smile was cruelty. The worst part was how she acted in front of others. Alone, she could hide her sharpness. But when friends visited, she used me as entertainment. She laughed at my clothes, at my slow steps, at my old habits. Her friends laughed with her, not knowing they were laughing at years of sacrifice, at a man who had given everything so she could sit there dressed in comfort. Each insult was a knife, each laugh was salt on the wound. But I said nothing. I thought silence was strength. I thought maybe she was just young, maybe she would grow out of it. I told myself she did not mean it, that stress and pride were blinding her. But deep down, I knew the truth. She no longer saw me as her father. She saw me as a burden, something to mock, something to tolerate, something beneath her. These were the first signs of cruelty. Not yet the final betrayal, but enough to show me the path we were heading down. Every word, every laugh, every look chipped away at the bond I had believed was eternal. I thought I had felt the worst of it, but I was wrong. The real cruelty was waiting, and when it came, it shattered me completely. The night it happened is burned into my memory. The house was full of her friends, young and loud, laughing over food and drinks I had paid for. I sat quietly at the table's edge, not wanting to disturb them, only wanting to be near my daughter. I thought maybe for once she would look at me with kindness, include me in her world, let me feel like I still mattered. Instead, she turned me into the joke. She leaned back in her chair, smirked, and said the words that shattered me. "You're worth less than my dog." Her friends laughed. Some laughed hard, slapping the table, thinking it was the funniest thing they had heard all night. My daughter laughed too. The sound of it cut through me like a blade. I sat still, but inside my heart was burning. I thought I had heard wrong. My ears rang, my body stiff. But then she repeated it, mocking again, pointing at me, comparing me to her dog like I was below even an animal. She said it not in anger, but in pride. She wanted the laugh. She wanted to show her friends how little she thought of me. The room spun. I remembered the nights I gave up meals so she could eat. I remembered the times I worked in the cold so she could have shoes. I remembered the mornings I left before sunrise and returned after dark just so she could sit in warmth and comfort. All those sacrifices, years of my life, reduced to one sentence. "You're worth less than my dog." Her friends stared at me, waiting for my reaction. Some smirked, some whispered, some avoided my eyes. They did not know me, did not know my story, but in that moment, they believed her. They believed I was nothing, and she enjoyed it. She sat there proud, laughing louder, making sure everyone knew I was beneath her. My body stayed calm. I did not move. I did not shout. My face was still, but my chest felt like it was caving in. I wanted to ask her, "Do you know what I gave up for you? Do you remember who carried you when you were sick? Do you remember who bought your first car, who paid for your house, who funded your life?" But I said nothing. My silence was heavier than any words I could have spoken. I stared at her and realized the truth. She no longer saw me as her father. She no longer saw me as a man. To her, I was a burden, a clown, a joke to use for entertainment. She had stripped me of all dignity with one sentence and laughter that echoed like knives. That night, the bond between us was not just damaged, it was destroyed. You can forgive mistakes. You can forgive anger. But words spoken with cruelty, words spoken with joy, cannot be taken back. She had compared me to a dog, less than a dog, and she had done it proudly in front of others. I sat there until the laughter faded, until they turned back to their drinks and their gossip. I did not rise, I did not cry. I just sat in silence, my heart cracked open. Inside, pain boiled into something else. Resolve. She thought she had humiliated me. She thought she had reduced me to nothing with one cruel joke. But she had forgotten something. She had forgotten who had built her life. She had forgotten who still held the keys to her future. She had forgotten that the man she mocked still owned everything she relied on. And as I sat there, quiet and still, I already knew. Her words had cost her everything. That night I did not move when she laughed. I sat still in my chair while her words echoed again and again in my head. "You're worth less than my dog." She thought it was funny. She thought it was clever. She thought her friends would remember her wit. But it was not wit. It was cruelty. I did not shout back. I did not argue. I just sat silent, face calm, while my chest burned with fire. My silence was not weakness. It was control. On the outside, I looked small, like an old man taking the insult. But inside, I was a storm. Every memory of sacrifice came back to me in that moment. Every tear I had hidden. Every pain I had endured. Every day I worked until my body begged me to stop. I thought of the shoes I bought for her when my feet bled inside old boots. I thought of the birthday gifts I bought her while I skipped meals. I thought of the nights I stayed awake so she could sleep warm and safe. All those memories rose like ghosts around me while she laughed. I remembered when she was sick as a child. Fever burned her body. I carried her through the night to the clinic, holding her tight against my chest while rain soaked my back. I prayed she would survive. I whispered, "Don't leave me." That same girl now mocked me as worth less than her dog. I remembered when she begged me for a car, crying that her friends all had one. I sold land I had saved for retirement to buy it. I put the keys in her hand, and she smiled like a queen. That same girl now mocked me as less than an animal. I remembered when she wanted her own place. She cried that she needed freedom. I gave her the down payment for her house. I signed the papers with my name. I told myself it was worth it, because a father must give. That same house now held the laughter of my humiliation. As I sat at the table, the room filled with her friends' laughter, I realized the cruel truth. She never saw the sacrifices. She never cared. To her, they were not proof of love. They were invisible. She had grown blind, spoiled by everything I gave, unable to see the man behind it. And now she saw me as nothing. I did not cry in front of them. I refused to give her that power. I kept my face straight, my eyes steady, though inside my chest was breaking. I knew what she had done could never be undone. Some words cut too deep to ever heal. But silence is powerful. Silence holds secrets. While she thought she had destroyed me, she did not know that her future still rested in my hands. The bank accounts she used, the money she relied on, the savings she counted as hers, all of it came from me. She laughed, but she forgot who I was. She forgot that the man she mocked still controlled her entire life. I sat through the night, humiliated in front of strangers, but by the time the laughter faded, my pain had hardened. My silence was not the end, it was the beginning. She thought she had won by mocking me. She thought she had erased my worth with a cruel joke, but her laughter had sealed her fate. My daughter thought her words erased me. She thought calling me worth less than my dog would make me small, weak, powerless. She thought laughter could destroy a lifetime of work. But she forgot something important. She forgot about power. She forgot about paper. She forgot about money. Every account she used was seeded by me. The down payment for her house came from my savings. The car she drove was registered in my name. Her monthly spending, the cards she swiped, the money she thought was hers, all of it had strings leading back to me. For years I had built a safety net for her. I had opened accounts, set up transfers, created funds, and left her believing it was all hers. But it wasn't. It was mine. My name sat on every contract. My signature authorized every withdrawal. Without me, she had nothing. She forgot who taught her how to live. She forgot who built her life brick by brick. She forgot that the man she mocked still held the keys to everything she touched. She had grown so used to my giving that she believed it was endless. She believed she could spit on me and I would still feed her. She believed she could mock me and I would still pay her bills. She believed blood tied me to her forever. But blood without respect means nothing. As I sat silent that night, I began to see it clearly. All the money she relied on, all the comfort she enjoyed, all the security she took for granted. It was all mine. Every dollar she spent without thinking had been earned with my hands. Every bill she ignored had been paid by me. She thought she had climbed above me. In reality, she was standing on my shoulders, and I could step away any time. I realized then that my silence was not weakness. It was strength. She thought she had humiliated me, but I still had the power to end her illusion with a single signature. She had mocked me as worth less than her dog, but her dog's food was bought with my money. Her roof stood because of my funds. Her savings existed because of my transfers. It was almost cruel how blind she was. She had laughed while eating food paid for by me, sitting in a house built by me, surrounded by things bought with my sacrifice. And she had called me worthless. That night, my humiliation turned into clarity. She had handed me the reason to act. She had forgotten who I was. She had forgotten what I could do. And soon, she would remember. That night, after the laughter died down and the guests left, I sat alone in the quiet. My daughter was in her room, still proud of the cruel words she had spoken. She believed she had silenced me. She believed she had made me small. But she was wrong. In that silence, I made my decision. I would not argue. I would not shout. I would not explain the pain she caused. I had no interest in begging for her respect. Respect forced is not respect at all. Love demanded is not love. She had made her choice when she mocked me. And I would make mine. I decided that night that my revenge would not come with anger. It would not come with broken dishes or raised voices. It would come with silence. It would come with paper, with signatures, with quiet moves she would never see until it was too late. I would not strike her in the face. I would strike her future. She thought words had no cost. She thought laughter was free. She forgot that every action has a price. That night, I decided she would pay the price for her cruelty. I looked back at all the years I had given her. Food, shelter, money, gifts, sacrifices. I remembered carrying her as a baby, guiding her as a child, funding her as an adult. I remembered every moment of care, every sleepless night, every dollar earned with sweat and pain. And then I remembered her words. "You're worth less than my dog." Those words erased everything. So I made my choice. She would no longer eat from my hand. She would no longer spend from my pocket. She would no longer live on the foundation I had built. I would strip away the comfort she took for granted. I would pull away the ground beneath her feet. She wanted me to be worthless? Then I would show her what worthless truly felt like. The decision was final. No second chances. No forgiveness. From that night forward, my daughter was no longer my heir, no longer my priority, no longer my blood in action, only in name. I smiled to myself in the silence. She thought she had won with her words, But she had handed me the weapon. She had given me the reason to act. My revenge would not be loud, it would not be messy. It would be clean, sharp, silent, and permanent. And when it was done, she would finally understand. The next morning, I did not wake with anger. I woke with a plan. My body ached from age and old work, but my head was clear. I dressed slowly and put the folder in my coat. Inside were papers I had kept for years, accounts, statements, deeds, numbers I knew by heart. I had always been careful. I had planned for her future. I had set things up so she would be safe. Now, those same things would keep her from safety. I went to the lawyer's office. He knew my voice before I spoke. He watched my hands as I set the folder on his desk. I told him the truth, plain and short. I said, "She mocked me. She said I was less than her dog. I will not give her what she does not deserve." He asked no questions about my feeling. He asked only about the law. That was what I wanted. Law could do what anger could not. Law would make the change clean and final. We talked about options. I did not want to ruin my name with tricks. I wanted the change to be true and legal. The lawyer reminded me that the accounts and funds were in my name or under arrangements I controlled. He reminded me I could change beneficiaries, stop transfers, and redirect money where I wished. He drafted documents while I sat and watched. I signed where I needed to sign. I put my mark on pages that changed who would get what. My hand shook, not with fear, but with the weight of the act. Each stroke of the pen felt like closing a door. I told him where the money should go, not to her, not to anyone who laughed at me. I named places and people who had stayed kind in small moments. I set aside funds for old workers, for a shelter in town, for a few relatives who had shown me respect. I set up an account for my name to carry what I would still need. I made sure the transfers were clear and final. I asked for no loopholes. I wanted her to have nothing she had not earned by respect. The lawyer typed the words and read them back. I listened. I nodded. I signed. I did not log into any account in anger. I did not break locks or forge names. Everything I did was legal. That was important to me. I had built my life on honest work. I would not sully it with trickery. I used the authority I had. I used the paper I had signed years ago. I used the trust I had placed with banks and with the law. That made my action final. It made it clean. It made it something she could not laugh off. After the lawyer left for the bank calls, I went home and waited. I did not tell her. I gave no warning. I did not look her in the face. I stayed quiet because silence is sharp. The calls and letters came to the bank, to her address, and to places that mattered. Notices arrived that transfers had been stopped. The automatic payments she counted on were paused. The lines of credit she used were closed. The card she flashed in front of friends would not work. I watched the mail pile and knew the day would come. That night I sat in my chair and thought of the years. I had given her the car, the house, the life she lived. I had never held those things over her head. I thought they would be her safety, not her weapon. But she had turned them into tools to mock me. So I moved them away. I moved money to trusted hands. I redirected accounts to those who would respect what I had built. I left seeds of help for people who earned it. I cut the ropes that bound her comfort to my name. I did not take every cent. I left enough for her to live if she learned and changed. That was not mercy. That was fairness by my measure. I wanted her to feel the weight of what she had done. I wanted her to face a choice, change or suffer the results of her choice. I did not want her to die in the street. I wanted her to learn the cost of bitter words. I wanted her to understand that life is not free and respect is not a joke. When the transfers cleared, the bank sent the notices. When the cards were cut, the bank sent the letters. When the direct deposit stopped, her rent went late. When her savings were moved, her balance became a number she could not ignore. Money is plain and blunt. It tells the truth in figures. Her friends who thought money was endless now saw it was not. Her phone calls turned to panic. Her voice, once light and full of jokes, came through thin and sharp when she finally called me. She asked, "What did you do?" I answered with a calm she had never heard. I said nothing for a long time. She begged. She pleaded. She offered apologies slick and quick, like they had been learned from a script. I listened and kept my face still. That silence was the answer she needed. Word spread. People who had laughed at my daughter's jokes now watched her slow fall. They whispered in the market and in the coffee shop. The relatives who had pretended not to notice how she spoke to me now changed their tone. Some offered help to her, but with hard faces. Some turned away. Friends who had eaten from her table without a thought now checked their own pockets before answering her calls. The world is small in a town. News travels on thin threads of voice. Her shame was not hidden for long. She came to the house the next day, shaking, asking for help. Her face was wet with tears, but tears can buy little when the accounts are empty. She dropped to her knees and said words she had never said to me before. Sorry, forgive me, please. In that moment, I felt the old ache of fatherhood. I felt the pull that kept me giving for years, but I also remembered the table, the laughter, the dog joke. I remembered how she had set me down in front of her friends and laughed. I remembered the sharp joy in her voice. I told her the truth, simple and plain. I said, "You called me less than your dog. I will not give what you do not deserve." She clutched my hands and begged, but hands can only take what hands hold. I had moved what I could move. I had closed the taps she leaned on. The bank could not return funds with a word. Paper had been signed. Law had been used. My action had weight, and it would stand. In the weeks after, she learned to count again. She learned that money is not a joke. She learned to ask, to work, to stand in lines she had never stood in before. Pride is a hard thing to kneel before. Her learning was slow and sharp. She lost friends who had fed on her wealth. She found new people who would not laugh at a father. She came to understand that the man she mocked had given her more than money. He had given her life and a chance to be better. But that lesson came late and cost her comfort. I did not gloat when her account read 0 that morning. I felt a heavy calm. I had acted with my head, not my hands. I had used the law, the paper, and the silence she had given me. Her laughter had been paid for, not in coin, but in consequence. I had taken back what was mine to protect what I valued, dignity, respect, and a life not built on mockery. When the last notice cleared and her balance read empty, I put the papers away. I did not celebrate. I did not dance. I simply sat and breathed. The pain she caused me would not return the years I had given, but it would teach her something she would not forget. The execution of my decision had been quiet and sure. It had used no violence, no tricks, only the steady power of what a man owns and what the law allows. It was final. It was clean. And it was mine to bear. The next morning, the truth spread like wind. It did not stay quiet. People talked. Her phone rang with calls that were not kind. The first call was from the bank. She looked at the screen and then went white. She had planned weddings, trips, repairs, a life that cost money. Now the cards were dead. The balance read 0. She did not believe it at first. She checked again and again. Then panic came like a cold hand. Neighbors saw her at the door. They watched her pace the floor. She went outside and walked down the street with no purse, no comfortable laugh. Word traveled fast in a small town. People who had smiled at her in the market now looked away. Those who had borrowed favors from her family began to cross the street. The same people who once wanted to be near her money now stepped back. Her friends called and then stopped calling. They had cheered when she showed off new clothes. They had laughed at her jokes when the wine was full. Now their voices were small. Some said, "We are busy." Others did not answer at all. When she went to the cafes where she used to sit with her group, heads turned. A few faces made quick excuses and left. Her laughter faded. The circle that once lifted her up shrank. Relatives watched and whispered. Some came to her door and said words that felt like knives. "You should not have spoken to your father like that," they said in half voices. "You never see how much he gave you." They told her the story of the man who worked in rain and heat to pay for her books. They did not shout. They spoke in cold facts. Facts are hard to stand in front of when your pockets are empty. Her landlord knocked. Rent was late. The letter was quiet and formal. Payment due, it said. She had always paid more than once so that she would be safe. Now her safety net had holes. She called the bank to beg. The bank clerk read the files and explained that transfers were stopped. Agreements were changed. The help she had counted on was gone. Papers had power. Paper closed doors she expected to find open. Her colleagues knew. Gossip is quick in the office. Men in ties who once nodded to her at the elevator now looked sharp and distant. Her boss asked for a meeting and used the word responsibility. She used to sit at lunch with a group who treated her like one of them. Now they slipped out the back door when she came in. The coffee cups moved away as she sat down. Work became thin. Offers stopped. Where money flows, favors follow. When money ends, favors stop. The bride she had planned with, the florist, the caterer, all had lists and calls and schedules. Many lost money that day because they had counted on a household that would pay. They were angry. They called and complained. They wanted payment and answers. They had to close doors and move flowers back into boxes. The people who depended on the wedding faced bills. Her cruelty did not only touch her life, it touched others too. Money is a web. When one thread is cut, the net shakes. Her lover, if she had one, began to show other colors. Some men act when money is gone. Men who stand by you when your pockets are full sometimes move when the empty days come. There were late nights and harsh words. Promises were thin then. She found her phone unanswered late at night. She sat alone. The person she thought might carry her through rough times stepped away. Love built on comfort is fragile. Her name moved in the church notes. People who once spoke her name with a smile now said it with a sigh. The priest saw her and did not pretend surprise. He had watched the way she mocked a man who fed her life. He spoke to her once with gentle truth. "Respect is weighty," he said. It sounded small, but it pushed hard. She flinched as each small truth hit. She tried to sell things. She put a watch in the window. She sold jewelry at the pawn shop and watched the price. The things that looked rich on her arm were worth little when the buyer smelled fear. She learned quickly that the world measures different when your wallet is empty. She learned how quick people are to judge a fall. Pride becomes a stone you carry when you have nothing to cover it. Some people offered help with hard faces. They did not forget how she spoke to me. They put limits on that help. A neighbor gave a small bag of food and said, "You must learn." The neighbor's wife added, "Respect must return." Help came with lessons tied to it. That made her anger burn. She wanted the old indulgence back, not wisdom wrapped in pity. She went to my door one night with tears and a voice soft as paper. She begged. She asked how this could happen. She asked for a loan. She said sorry in a voice that had not meant it before. But I had listened to that voice when it was loud and proud. Apology must be more than shaking hands and quick words. It must be steps taken every day. She had the chance to change. The chance would come, but not on my terms. The town marks you by stories. People who had been silent now told the tale. The daughter who called her father less than a dog, and the father who moved the money away. They said, "Words have weight." They told the story with low voices and long looks. Children asked their parents what a father should be. The story became a lesson for smaller ears. Her fall was public. It taught others the cost of cruelty. Her shame grew in the space where laughter once lived. She tried to patch it with quick promises. She tried to rewrite nights with gifts and flash apologies. But money shows truth. The bank statements were plain. The numbers did not lie. Friends who had used her now found distance. She made calls that rang and dropped. People who had eaten her food now opened doors to new circles and left her outside. Her life became counting. Balance, bills, and appointments filled the days that had once been parties. She learned to cook simple meals. She learned to sweep floors. She stood in lines for hours to earn small help. The lessons were sharp. They cut pride right down the middle. Each small workday taught her the price of what she had thrown away. Meanwhile, I watched in quiet. I heard stories through letters, through a neighbor's slow voice, through a bank clerk who left me notes. I did not dance in her failure. I did not dance when her accounts read empty. I felt a heavy calm. The laughter she and her friends had shared that night had cost them all much more than a joke. The fallout was not a fireworks show. It was a slow, cold rain that washed away a life built on another man's sweat. In the end, the lesson spread. The people who had laughed learned to look twice at the jokes they make. The town kept the story as a warning. She kept the memory as a weight. Her future had been erased from its easy path. She had to walk a harder road now. The fallout changed everything. The life of comfort she had taken for granted was gone. She would learn, slowly, to earn it back or live without it. The fallout did not stop with empty accounts. It grew into a shadow that followed my daughter everywhere. Once she had walked with her head high, proud of her looks, proud of her circle, proud of her money. Now each step was heavy. People stared at her not with envy, but with pity. Some stared with disgust. She had laughed at me in front of others. Now others laughed at her behind closed doors. At family gatherings, silence met her. Relatives who once praised her dress and her car now turned their eyes. A cousin told her bluntly, "Respect lost is respect gone." No one defended her. No one told her it was a mistake. They all knew the truth. She had mocked the very man who built her life. She had mocked me, and now she was paying. The bride's family, the ones who had trusted her for deposits, events, promises, came to collect. They were angry, not because of me, but because she had lived beyond her means. They had expected my backing. When that backing disappeared, they saw her for what she was. They demanded money. She had none. They demanded promises. She had none. The wedding they dreamed of collapsed, and the blame pointed to her. Her pride crumbled. In the market, whispers followed her. Old women pointed. Young men smirked. Shopkeepers who once greeted her with smiles now waited for her to pay before handing bags. She felt it. Respect, once lost, cannot be bought again with fake words. It must be rebuilt step by step. But she had no steps left. Each road was blocked. Each door closed. At home, her nights grew long. She sat with bills on the table. She cried at numbers she could not fix. The lights dimmed. The fridge grew empty. The phone calls stopped. Even her dog looked at her with blank eyes, fed from cheap scraps instead of rich food. The irony was sharp. She had once said I was worth less than that dog. Now that dog ate while she begged. Her so-called friends turned their backs first. Friends who had cheered her laughter, who had joined in mocking me, now avoided her. They left her messages unread. They made excuses. They found new people with money to cling to. Her circle vanished. She was alone in the same house I had once given her. Work did not save her. She had never learned to build. She had never learned to fight for herself. I had given her everything too easily. Now that it was gone, she was lost. She tried to work extra hours, but pride is heavy. She hated the stares. She hated the feeling of being judged. She had judged me once with ease. Now the world judged her. She could not stand it. Some people offered small help, but help is not free. They reminded her of her words. They reminded her of her cruelty. She hated hearing the story repeated, yet the story spread. She had mocked her father. She had called him worthless. Then he had erased her future. That story lived in every corner. She could not run from it. The worst part was not hunger. The worst part was not debt. The worst part was not shame. The worst part was the silence I gave her. When she knocked at my door, I opened. I listened. I saw her face broken with tears. She begged. She apologized. But I gave her nothing. I let the silence sit between us. Silence was sharper than words. She had laughed at my silence once. Now silence crushed her. She went back to her house with nothing in her hands. She sat with her thoughts. She remembered what she had said. Those words would not leave her. "You're worth less than my dog." They haunted her now. They were her own chains. Every night she replayed them. Every morning she faced the results. The aftermath was not sudden. It was slow, steady, cruel. It stripped away her pride layer by layer. First the money, then the friends, then the respect, then the comfort. She was left with herself, and herself was empty. She had to face that truth. The daughter who mocked her father was now mocked by the world. The girl who thought laughter was free learned the cost of it. And the cost was her future. Justice does not always come with loud noise. Sometimes it comes with silence, with steady breath, with a man who no longer bends. I lived my life giving, bending, sacrificing. But in the end, I chose to stand straight. My daughter thought she had broken me. She thought one joke, one cruel laugh, one night of humiliation would make me powerless. She forgot that power sits not in words, but in action. And I acted. After I erased her access, after I closed the accounts and cut the lines, I did not chase her. I did not stand in the market telling people my side. I did not argue with relatives. I did not explain myself to her friends. I stayed silent. Silence was my armor. Silence was my weapon. The world saw what had happened without me raising my voice once. That was justice. I lived quietly. I ate simple meals. I walked with a straight back, even if it was slow. I knew peace in a way I had not known for years. My house was calm. My nights were free of her shouting, free of her complaints, free of her mocking eyes. I woke each morning and breathed easy. That is something money cannot buy. That is something dignity alone can give. The money I had taken back did not sit idle. I directed it where it mattered. To charities that fed children, to families who respected their elders, to people who knew the value of work. Every dollar that left my hands went to someone who would never laugh at me, someone who would honor the gift. That was justice too, to know that what I had built with sweat and broken bones did not feed arrogance again. My daughter, meanwhile, learned her lessons slow. Each day was a new bruise to her pride. She had once stood tall because of my work. Now she stumbled because she had no ground of her own. She begged for help in corners where no one listened. She knocked on doors that stayed closed. The same people who had laughed with her at that table now left her behind. That was justice, to feel the sting of her own cruelty return to her. Neighbors spoke of me differently after that. Some said I was too harsh, but most nodded with respect. They said, "He was quiet, but he was strong." They said, "He taught a lesson." They said, "This is what happens when you forget who raised you." Their words did not feed my pride, but they gave me peace. They showed me that people saw the truth. That was justice. I did not smile when she wept. I did not clap when her accounts showed nothing. I did not dance when she lost friends. My justice was not joy in her pain. My justice was the calm of knowing she could no longer spit on my life while eating from my hand. My justice was the weight of silence, the finality of signatures, the dignity of standing tall again. When she came again, begging, I listened. I did not slam the door. I let her speak. She used words like sorry, like forgive. But her voice was still thin, still weak, still tied to need. I knew the difference between true regret and hunger. I did not answer. I let her feel the silence again. She left with nothing but her own voice echoing in her ears. That was justice. As time passed, I aged further. My body slowed, but my mind stayed sharp. I sat in my chair and remembered the journey. I had given, and I had lost. I had been mocked, but I had risen. I had chosen silence over weakness. I had chosen law over shouting. I had chosen dignity over pain. And I had won. My justice was not revenge in the simple sense. It was balance. She had called me worthless. I showed her what worthless felt like when the ground is cut from beneath your feet. She had laughed at me in front of friends. I left her standing alone when those friends walked away. She had stripped me of respect. I stripped her of comfort. That was balance. That was justice. In the end, I lived with peace. My name stayed clean. My money went to worthy hands. My dignity stayed whole. My daughter was left with nothing but the memory of her words and the emptiness they brought. She had mocked me as worth less than her dog. I left her with less than she ever expected. That is how I ended it. Final thought. She mocked me as worth less than her dog. I stayed silent. But silence carries power. Her bank accounts emptied, her future erased, while I lived in peace. That was my justice.